Hello everyone, my name is Joshua and welcome to Northern Solar. In this video we're going to be looking back at November 2023 to see how much we've generated on our solar panels here in Cheshire, how much money it saved us, and continue to answer the question, are solar panels worth it? So as usual we've got quite a lot to get through, so I'll jump straight into the presentation. So for those of you that are new to the channel, this is our house here in Cheshire. We have 8 kilowatt of solar on the roof, there's 4 kilowatt on the front of the house facing west and 4 kilowatt on the back of the house facing east. They're connected to a SolarEdge 6 kilowatt inverter and we have 13 kilowatt hours of Growatt battery storage. This month we've also got a new EV arrived. Any of you that can guess what it is, there'll be bonus points for everyone. That will be announced later in the video. Jumping straight into the solar production, as you can see, a pretty varied month. We've got a low, I think the lowest day down here somewhere, 1.75 kilowatt hours on the 23rd. That's pretty low. We had a few days in that similar sort of 2 kilowatt hours for the entire day. So yeah, really low this time of year. Anyone that's been watching the channel for any sort of length of time will see we generally are doing better than that. But as we're getting into the winter times, we are seeing some really low days at the moment. Highest day, we got 10.7 there on the 11th, I think that is, and overall on average about 5.2 kilowatt hours per day. So a total for the month of November 157.09 kilowatt hours generated. As you can see, there's quite a lot of variation between a good day and a bad day. Like you're getting 1.75 or 10, like depending if it's a really sunny day or a really cloudy day. So it does make a massive difference on the weather, as you'd expect. And this time of year the days are pretty short, so we're not getting a huge amount of generation even on a good day. So this is the solar production since we've had the system installed. We've got 2022 was when it was first installed, the blue bars. Here you can see that April was the first month last year, and you can see 2023, the green bars. We've nearly got a full year of data for 2023. So comparing November generation this year with November generation last year, you can see we're slightly higher. 146 last year, 157 this year. That gives us 7.5% more this year. It's not very much, but it's nice to be back above last year because the last 2 months we were a little bit below, and then the 2 months for July and August we were significant below last year. May and June we were above last year, and April again below. So overall the weather plays a big difference year to year, which month does better compared to 2023 and 2022. But yeah, overall not too much different from last year in November. So this graph we get from our Octopus account, which shows our import and export to and from the grid. So as well as what we generate in the solar, we obviously need to import some electricity to power the house, charge the home battery which we have, and power the car, because as you can see some days there's just not enough electricity to do that. So what we're tending to do is import overnight to charge the battery, and anytime there's not enough solar during the day, then the battery can cover that sort of missing demand. I'll go a bit more into that later on and how that specifically works in the house, but as you can see we imported, as well as the solar generation, we also imported 571 kilowatt hours from the grid, which is a huge amount actually, but as we'll go into later, almost all of that is actually the car. The 2 cars we have now do use a lot of electricity, so we're charging those pretty much all the time off peak at a cheap rate, which I'll go into a little bit as well. And as you can see, we've also got grid export in November, which is pretty rare. We have a couple of instances why we export, which seems strange because we're importing so much during the day. What we're doing is we're charging the battery up to full every night, so there's always battery there in the morning. So if the weather's terrible the next day, we're generally running on the battery most of the time. If the sun comes out, it starts to charge the battery if we're not using it. Say if we're both working in the office rather than working at home, or if it's a weekend and we're out, the battery might get to be full and then it exports back out to the grid. And that seems a little bit counterintuitive because we have an export tariff which pays, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on, and that cost is very similar to what it costs us to buy electricity overnight. So it's actually kind of netting out a zero benefit to export to the grid or charge the battery. So really it's safer to have the battery fully charged, so you've always every morning, so you've always got that reserve of to use what you need if the weather's terrible. There's also been a few of these saving sessions, which I'll go into a bit more detail a little while, where we've managed to make a bit more money by exporting to the grid during those sessions. So yeah, 58 kilowatt hours exported in November is a lot higher. Also, we were away for about a week as well, so not a lot of usage in the house. And if the weather was good here, the battery was fully charged, it will export. So yeah, more so than last year, I think we've exported this month. But yeah, it's not a huge amount when you compare it to what we've imported. So this is our grid import across the year. As you can see, it drops down massively during the sunnier times of the year, and it's starting to ramp back up now in the winter. And again, the base of this is mostly our car, the two cars that we've got. We've previously had a electric car and a plug-in hybrid. Now we've got two fully electric cars. So a lot of this usage is actually the winter. So there's probably like a big chunk of this, if you took it out, you could just see the house usage, which would follow a similar pattern, because the house usage does go up in the winter as we're charging more from the grid to power the home battery. But it's an interesting one to see how the consumption from the grid changes throughout the year. It's basically the inverse of the solar generation. The solar generation would be going the other way, as you'd expect. Right, so moving on. This is the sort of pattern overlaid with the solar generation. So I've created this graph to kind of show the solar generation in green throughout this year. This is all the data we've had since January this year. And then our consumption. So the grid consumption is the red line. So you can see this this comes down massively during the summer and then starts to come back up again in the winter. The total consumption in the house is the blue line, and that's not flat, but it does vary month to month depending on our usage, but it's more consistent. And it's, again, mostly driven by the EV charging. You can see the grid consumption, it just follows the total consumption really is the same as the EV charging almost. And you can see in the summer, we're not really having anything other than EV charging from the grid all through from sort of March, middle of March maybe to April. The grid is the only thing we're using, the EV is the only thing that we're using the grid for. And then as you see, as we start coming into the end of summer, autumn, there's a bit of a gap, and this gap between the EV purple line and the grid consumption red line is the house usage, so charging the battery into in the overnight period. And you can see that starts to expand more in the winter period, so we've got quite a lot of usage in the winter periods where the house is needing more power from the grid than the solar can provide. So as I mentioned, we have a Octopus tariff which gives us a cheap overnight rate of 9 pence per kilowatt hour for the 4-hour period between 12:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the morning, and the rest of the time it's 31.41p per kilowatt hour during the day. We also have a fixed export tariff of 8 pence per kilowatt. Anyone that was watching this channel during the summer will have known that we were on a different tariff then with varying rates throughout the day for import and export. But during this time of year, it makes a lot more sense for us to be on this fixed tariff for a short overnight period of cheap electricity and a constant 8p export rate. Anyone else who lives in this part of the world, for some reason, our standing charge is ridiculously high at 60p per day. I think doesn't really matter what tariff you're on. I think Scottish Power Energy Network is the local DNO electricity network in this area, and their standing charge just seems to be really high. Let me know in the comments what your standing charges are, because I always feel like 60p is a ridiculously high tariff, to be honest. But yeah, so this is what allows us to charge the car for cheap overnight, charge the home battery for cheap overnight, and avoid paying the higher price during the day by using the solar and the batteries combined. The other big thing that's happened this year is we've been able to take advantage of these Octopus saving sessions, which they call Octopus, which is weird. So the idea is that whatever, and in these sort of sessions that they set up and they advertise a few hours a day here and there, when the grid hasn't got enough capacity to supply the country, they, rather than switching on more gas-powered gas-powered electricity generation, they help the grid balance by offering bonuses to people for using less electricity. And they did this last winter and people made money out of it. What they've changed this year is they've allowed export to the grid to be counted as a saving, because our grid usage at that time was always really low, so we would never really be making any savings because our battery was powering the house all the day rather than the grid powering the house, so we weren't really able to take advantage of this saving sessions last year. But the rules have changed this year, so they were allowing, if you export to the grid, they will give you points for every kilowatt hour that you export during that time. So we set our battery up, and you can see this graph here which shows our consumption in the house, and this section here shows the battery exporting to the grid, the battery state of charge coming down. So this green bar is the green state of charge coming down from almost full to about 50%. So in that 1 hour we were able to export 2.58 kilowatt hours, I think it was, which they give us 4,648 points for, which they arbitrarily have decided that 8 octo points is 1 penny. So yeah, basically they give you money to export to the grid on top of your export payment, which is an extra way of helping save money on your electricity bill. So we've had 2 sessions of these in November. The first one was 2.58 kilowatt hours, and the second one was a longer session. We were able to do 4.21 kilowatt hours, and they tell you what rate they're going to pay out, how many points per kilowatt hour they're going to pay out in advance. So I think this one it worked out about £2.50 per kilowatt hour, and this one was more like £4 per kilowatt hour or something. So there is a bit of money to be made as an additional savings. So I'll go more into the financials on that in a little while as well. So what I tend to do in these videos is pick a random day of the month and go through how the generation and how the consumption looked on that month. So picking the 18th of November, as you can see, really late start now, sun coming up just after 8 o'clock, the solar generation starts. Even when the sun came out, you're only generating 1.75, maybe 2 on a good day, kilowatts of solar at any point, but really, really low generation and a really, really early finish to the day around about 3:30, 3:45. So as you can see, not a lot of generation on this day at all. So this graph is the consumption in the house, and the solar is this greenish box behind. You can see it's the same sort of shape that we had before, but stretched out a little bit. This graph shows the consumption from the grid and the consumption from the battery. So what you can see is this green box behind it is the state of charge of the battery, so around about 60% from the night before. And then as soon as it hits midnight, the battery starts charging from the grid, which is this orange box here. The consumption in the house is the sort of box underneath this, the sort of dark red one. So not a lot going on in the house overnight. A little bit of the internet router, some Christmas lights or whatever's on, I don't know. So mostly just charging up that home battery, which charges at 3 kilowatt and then starts to ramp down as it gets closer to its 100%. And as you can see, the battery was full by around say 3 a.m. And then the load comes down to the thing. I think maybe we had a washing machine on, so before 4:30, rather than using the battery power that is just charged up, it will still use the grid on that cheap rate. So washing machine or dishwasher or something's come on in the middle of the night, and then after 4:30 you can see this blue bar starts to appear, which is the load from the battery, and the battery starts to discharge as we're using the electricity during the day. So here's quite a little bit of usage during the day. Here you see the demand starts to go up, and we've got breakfast being made, we've got laundry being done, dishwashers, tumble dryers, all sorts of things going on. So as you can see here, this earlier part of the morning here, sort of maybe 9 till 11, the sun was out and not much was being used, so the battery actually started to charge up again. And then you have the washing machine or dishwasher or whatever goes on in the afternoon, starts to drain the battery, still drains the battery, all these sort of random bits of usage during the day. And then you can see maybe cooking dinner in the evening. A little spike of grid usage there where the solar and the battery weren't able to cover the load momentarily for potentially maybe having the kettle and the microwave on at the same time or something like that. Tiny bit of load from the grid there, but not very much. And then again, draining the battery all the way down into the evening, and then finishing around maybe 40% at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of a typical day at the moment. This time of year, the battery covers most of it, and you get a little bit of charge back into the battery from the solar during the day, but not very much at all. So mostly the people watch these videos to find out the financials is what do we make in terms of money from the solar. So obviously during this winter period, you're not making a lot of money. You can see the numbers here. 157 kilowatt hours generated, 58 exported to the grid, which means we consumed 99 directly from the solar. So our grid consumption was 571 kilowatt hours, but as you can see, the vast majority of that is during the off-peak, so charging the cars and charging the home battery. Only 23 kilowatt hours of on-peak grid usage this month. This varies mainly down to if we have to maybe chuck a little bit of extra charge in the car, if we're going away somewhere long distance and we need to put extra charge in the car at the time, other than that, it's just bits and pieces here and there where maybe the solar and the battery can't quite cover the demand in the house at any one point. If we've got multiple things on at once, the battery can only power 3 kilowatts and whatever solar was on top of that. So sometimes it might be using a little bit of peak from the grid, but as you can see, it's very little across the month. Breaking that down into what we've consumed and exported, we consumed 63% of what we generated and we exported 37% roughly of what we generated. And as you can see, in terms of our usage, 14.8% from the solar, 81.8% from the grid, but in off-peak period, and 3.4% roughly during peak times. And that's pretty typical, as I'll show you the next slide in a minute with this on month to month. That's pretty normal throughout what we've seen since we've had the solar installed. So in terms of money, again, this is always a really difficult one to try and be accurate about how much money you've actually saved, because we've said standing charge is £18.05 with or without solar. The cost for our grid usage from Octopus would be £56.41 for what we've used this month. We estimate, and this is really hard to do, but we estimate that electricity to power the house, if we didn't have solar and batteries, would have cost £120.34 for the same amount of electricity that we use. And that's still using an off-peak tariff to charge the car. So you're not charging like full rate, full sort of high rate electricity to charge everything, because if you had an electric car and you were doing a lot of miles like we do, you would always get a split tariff. So I think overall the electricity cost, including the standing charge, would have been £138.39 if we'd not had solar and batteries, and if with the solar batteries including standing charge and the costs for the grid, £74.46. Obviously with the solar we made a little bit of money exporting to the grid, not a lot, £4.62 compared to zero if we didn't have it, and our 2 saving sessions made us £22.63. So it's a really good extra benefit, those 2 sessions, and Octopus think there may be 10 or 12 of those sessions across the winter season. So if you're working out maybe £10 on average, it's going to work out at maybe over £100 probably in savings this winter by being able to utilise our battery to export to the grid during that time. So yeah, our net electricity cost, if you include these 2 payments, was £47.21, whereas net electricity cost without solar we estimate would have been £138.39. So a monthly saving of £91.18, which, given the fact that it's not very sunny and solar and batteries working together with the tariffs that we've got and the saving sessions, £91 saved this month, not too bad at all. So this is every month we've had the solar since the start of April in 2022. This is really, really hard to read on the screen, I'm sure. There is a link in the description to download this spreadsheet as it is and dig into it as much as you want and look into how all the different months compare. But as you can see, this gives a good idea of the sort of patterns throughout the year. If you ignore this first month, because we didn't have a battery in that month, we had to wait for it to be delivered, so that one looks a little bit different. But what you can see is generally in the sunnier times in the month, everything's coming from the solar, a little bit off grid. When we got the EV, we started to use more off-peak green, and then very, very little red slices that sort of in the pie chart there, the peak usage of the grid. You can see here we were working from home a lot more here, doing a lot less miles in the car, so there's a lot less off-grid usage, and then we started charging the battery more, so the green box is the off-peak grid usage. And you can see those are bigger during the winter months. That one there is the total for the year of 2022. So yeah, bigger green section for grid usage but off-peak in the winter months, and then again the solar starts to come back in the summer, and then back in towards the winter you can see the off-peak grid usage taking over as the majority for what's powering the usage in the house. So yeah, feel free to click on the link in the description and download a copy of this from the Google Drive link. And yeah, play around with it, see what you think. Please feel free to point out any mistakes or suggest any improvements or any other metrics that might be useful to understand how that works. So one thing I like to do is compare how our usage and costs and savings compare with last year. So obviously consumption patterns change. We've got, like I say, we've got 2 full EVs now. We're also, the tariffs change each year, and your assumptions about what things cost might change as well. So what you can see is in November last year we generated pretty much the same as we did. We exported pretty much the same as we did last year. consumed pretty much the same as we did. The grid consumption is the big change. We're now charging 2 electric cars and the home battery. So you can see here a huge amount more of grid consumption, but mostly again in the off-peak time. A bit higher in the peak time, but again higher in the off-peak. Similar percentages between what we've generated and what we've exported as you'd expect, but as you can see here now, the grid consumption, the off-peak grid consumption is taking a huge percentage at 81% compared to just under 60% last time. But when we compare that to what electricity costs, the standing charge was a lot lower last year for the same month. It's gone up 27% this year. The cost for the grid usage, obviously we've spent a lot more on buying in electricity from the grid overnight to charge the car. So yeah, we've spent a lot more on the grid compared to what we did last year. But overall we were able to export a bit more. We got paid more for our exports this year, even though we exported the same amount roughly. We pretty much double the price, because last year the export tariff was a lot lower. We also had the saving sessions payment, which isn't listed in this little one as a line item, but the net electricity cost is a lot lower. And we estimate the cost without solar would have been a lot higher this year, because we've imported a lot more than we did last year. So last year's savings in November were £57.13. This year we're estimating the savings at £91.18, so a much higher percentage, gone up significantly since last year. And most of that will be down to that saving session, which we weren't able to take advantage of last year. So this is something that's always a contentious one. I had a really good chat with a gentleman in the comments on the video last month about payback and rates of return and things like that, and how it's calculated and what assumptions we should use. And it is really hard to calculate this sort of thing. I do my best to sort of put out there what I think is reasonable, and I'm always happy to chat about it. If people have got better ideas of how to calculate things, and I have added some things into this as a result of the conversations we were having last month. Essentially, our solar installation cost us £15,215.50. So we're hoping to have that paid off sometime around year 8 of this, and then projecting savings going forwards after that. The cumulative savings is year on year. So the first 12 months we had the solar, we think we saved just shy of £1,500. And I think we might even save more than that now in the next 12 months from it, because we're starting to see better sort of incentives with the export tariff and the saving sessions, and the difference between the export and the import and things. It just seems to be working a bit better now for anyone with solar and batteries. So this first year saving of 1495, I think will be probably closer to 1600, maybe even 1700 for year 2. But we'll have to see when we get there. But anyway, I make a bunch of assumptions that are listed out here, and again, this spreadsheet is available in the description, link in the description, if anyone wants to download it and play with it and see what they're sort of assuming. So the import and export rates, this was based on last year's numbers. So these are changing now. So this was all based on the year 1's figures of what we paid for electricity in year 1, what we generated, what we were able to save, and assumptions around how much we use from the grid and when we use it. It's quite hard again to be very specific on this, but what I did is I made a cumulative cash flow column for this year and ran some IRR and NPV numbers. And then this is a very sort of financial thing, which I'm not an expert in by any means, but IRR is sort of rate of return for the project. So if you were putting money in the bank and getting 5%, this, or maybe more, I don't know, depends what you put your money into, I guess, but if you had £15,000 to invest, this calculator thinks it's worth 15%, and that gives you a net present value, I believe the term is NPV. If you run it at 5% or 10%, this is the value of the project over the 25 years of the lifespan of the panels. So there are other things you could maybe consider. Might at some point have to spend a few £1,000s replacing batteries maybe in 10 years. It's difficult to know what batteries will cost in 10 years, maybe we'll get a bigger one, maybe a smaller one. Again, there's so many assumptions that will affect this, but in general, it looks like around about 7 to 8 years, we will have paid off the system and it will start turning a profit for us. And hopefully, over the long term, it's going to be worth thousands of pounds in profit for us. And that's kind of the point where most people would want to do solar, ignoring all of the sort of green credentials and trying to reduce your reliance on the grid and not being too open to market fluctuations in electricity prices and all that sort of factors that go into it. But yeah, again, really hard to be very accurate, but I think we've done a pretty good job at putting it together here. Again, always welcome some comments. If anyone's got any pointers, do let me know. So the other thing we have in the house is our Renault Zoe, which is my sort of go-to car for going to and from the office. Do about 80 miles a day. So this month we've done quite a lot of miles. We actually had a few more social engagements in November than we did in October. So 1,789 miles in the Zoe at an average of 4 miles per kilowatt hour. That was total charging in November, 346-ish kilowatt hours, and that's split between charging at home, which was 102, charging at work, which was just under 100, and then public charging. So don't usually do a lot of public charging, but November we had quite a few long distance trips up to the lakes, down to London, so we did quite a lot of more public charging, and as you can see, it's a lot more expensive. So charging at home costs us 9p a kilowatt hour, so about £9 worth of charging at home. Charging at work I don't have to pay for, which again, very lucky to be able to have that. So a lot of free charging there. Charging publicly on the DC fast charging, 70p per kilowatt hour. It's extremely expensive. And it's one of those things that makes it like, it stands out so much that if you have to rely on public charging for most of your miles, it's not very effective. Even with a really efficient car like the Zoe, which is not going to be the right car for everybody. It's only a small car, it's efficient, but it's not for everybody. 70p a kilowatt hour is a lot. And so overall we spent £110 on charging cars in November for the Zoe, and that's a lot more than we normally charge. It's probably 10 times what we normally pay. If you look back over the videos that we've done previously for previous months, it's usually less than 20 quid a month that we spend on charging. So this working out at 6p a mile in the Zoe, which is still fantastic when you compare it to what petrol would have cost at the average price of petrol at £1.50 a litre in November, 40 miles per gallon petrol car, that would have cost 306 quid. So we've saved £196 in November having using the Zoe and charging, as you can see here, at home, at work, and publicly charging. So yeah, not too bad overall in terms of savings on the Zoe. As promised, yeah, we've got a new EV this month. We previously had a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and then we sold that one and decided to get a second EV, having had so much success and really happy with how we have been able to manage with the Zoe. So if anyone guessed it right, the car is a Volvo C40. It's the single motor 175 kilowatt with a 66 kilowatt hour battery, well 66 kilowatt usable battery. Absolutely loving the car. It's really comfy, really nice car to drive, and so far we've had no issues with it at all. It's got a really good fast charger, which we haven't actually had to use the fast charger. We've only really charged this one at home this month. But yeah, overall, absolutely loving the car so far. So in terms of stats, we've done 407 miles. It isn't as efficient as the Zoe. It's a lot heavier, it's a lot bigger, it's got a lot more mod cons or whatever they say, a lot more comfort features in the car. It's obviously it's cold being in November as well. We're getting about 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour. All of that was charged at home. 147 miles did 144.69 kilowatt hours of charging, which cost £13.02. So that works out cost per mile of about 3p. So cost per mile actually was cheaper than the Zoe, but it's because we did a lot of public charging on the Zoe, while this one was always charged at home. So assuming 40 miles per gallon, saying £1.50 per litre average cost of petrol in November, 407 miles would have cost £69.84, so saving £56.82 in November. So yeah, between the two cars, really happy with their efficiency and the cost per miles, given what we pay for overnight charging at the house. So Octopus Electroverse is what we've been using for the public charging. Octopus is sort of teamed up and linked up with some of the bigger names, Ionity, Instavolt, and those sort of places. And you can link your charging directly to your Octopus account. It works really well for us because we've got like a credit on our Octopus account from export payments from the solar. So we've got money in there it's easy to use for the charging. It's just you use it through the app and it all just links together. I've only used it maybe 3 or 4 times, but we're really happy with it. If you are interested in joining the Electroverse network, it's free to join. If you want to use the code that we've got there, It's also a link in the description. You can get a £5 credit once you've charged up, and you also get a 5% discount on all of the prices at these charges if you're on Octopus Go. Which brings me on to the last plug, honestly, for Octopus. It does sound a bit like I'm sponsored by Octopus, I'm really not, but I've been with them for a while and they have been brilliant for us. The rates on the tariffs and the way that they set up their tariffs and sort of allow you to make extra money from exports and overnight charges stuff has been fantastic. If you're considering switching energy supplier, do consider switching to Octopus. And if you do decide to switch to Octopus, please do consider using our referral link. You will get £50 credit on your bill and we will get £50 credit on our bill. And yeah, a massive thank you to anyone that's used the link. It's really helpful, helps us pay for the electricity we need throughout the winter especially, and charging the car. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you again for anyone that's used the link before. So that's pretty much it really. It's waffled on as usual, waffled on forever, and there's quite a lot of detail in there. I'm trying to simplify it all as much as possible. But yeah, let me know what you think. How's your solar been getting on? If you've got solar, let me know how you're getting on in your part of the world, whether that's in the UK or wherever. And if you're considering getting solar, what are you looking for these days? There's probably a load of new things out on the market. It seems to be in the news all the time about new technology coming out for solar, electric cars and all that sort of thing. So please do let me know what you're looking at, and if you want any advice, there's plenty of people in the comments who are happy to share their opinion on what they think is a good thing to go for, depending on what you're after in your house. Yeah, other than that, it's answering the question as usual, are solar panels worth it? And again, for us, we have to say yes, we're saving money even through winter when it's not very sunny. It's been fantastic. So yes, for us, solar panels most definitely are worth it. And it really does depend on your usage, what you're looking to gain from the system, how much you're looking to spend on it, what your consumption is in the house, what tariffs you're using, and all these things. The combination that we've been able to use, the solar, the batteries, the electric cars, and the tariffs that go with it, have really helped us save a lot of money in this last sort of 18 months, maybe coming up towards getting to 2 years of solar in the house and off-peak tariffs and that sort of thing. It's really is fantastic. It's going to say it's not for everybody, but hopefully this video and this series has been able to give you some insight about how it actually works in the house once it's installed. But yeah, other than that, nothing else to say, but thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and this will be the last one this year. We'll post December's results in early January, so if I don't speak to you all before, have a lovely Christmas and New Year, and see you next time. Thanks very much.